It's me, Renee. I'm back. And as you can see and hear, my voice is all goody goody. Like yesterday and today was a bit iffy, but I've had some tea, and honestly, now I'm feeling good. So, yeah, here for another video. So, as some of you may know, this weekend I was at norcon, which is kind of Comic Con ish, but like for books. And it was happened in Oslo, capital of Norway. And yes, I went there. I There was things happening on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, though I didn't plan correctly. So yesterday I just took the train, so I didn't really manage to do something yesterday. But still, Saturday was great. So the people who were there were Ursula Vernon, or T. Kingfisher, which is a pen name of Ursula Vernon, and then also Emma Newman. And then there was a Norwegian author who came there. Well, technically there were several Norwegian authors, but I would have to say most of the Norwegian authors I hadn't heard about. But it's also kind of fun just to hear about people talking about general books, because even if they wrote a book 10 years ago or 5 years ago or this year, they still have this passion for books and reading and fantasy and science fiction. So that's still a delight to hear about people just fangirling together, really. And also Ursula like when Ursula Vernon was just the best. I loved whenever they talked because they had lots of panels and they just had the best insight and the best comments, and I loved it so much. Uh, so yeah, it was kind of interesting though, because on Friday, Ursula Honan was interviewed, and it was interviewed mostly about her horror books. And okay, so confession. Right now, I actually just read one Ursula Honan book, or a Taking Fisher book. I read The Wizard's Guide to. Okay, a moment. The Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking, but I do want to read more. But also, I know that they have some fantasy books, they have some kids' books, and they also have some horror books. And of course, like horror books, I'm not gonna touch them because I don't want like to be scared. So horror books, it's kind of one of the few genres I don't touch at all. So, like the interview talked about, like this book that's a horror book that you came up with last year. How is it in comparison to the first book? And I was like, I haven't heard about any of these books because I'm not into horror. But I suppose, like, still, so some things went across over my head. But still, it was just kind of nice just listening to people talk in general, and it was still a nice conversation, I would say. So yeah, that happened on Friday, and then on Saturday, there was I started with a talk about how to start a book club, which was kind of kind of redundant. I'm just going to use another word, redundant, because I already have a book club. Well, I have two book clubs. One of them I started myself, but it was just kind of the thing that I wanted to watch then, because there was like often you had like several things happening in different rooms, and I thought, what I'm gonna start a day with, I'll do a book club. And so yeah, it was just still kind of fun to like hear about how the book club's organizer had started the book club and how that had changed, and they had run a book club for 10 years. So it's yeah, still kind of nice to like hear about the experiences. So I like that. I did like it. After that, there was a talk about why Norwegians don't really read fantasy in Norwegian, and you might be like, oh, why don't we do that? And it's kind of two-folded sword. Yeah, sword. Well, two. Is it a word? Maybe it's a word in Norwegian. Okay, it's a two-folded issue. So, for one thing, there's not really a lot of science fiction or fantasy translated to Norwegian, or also there's not really a lot of Norwegian authors who write in those genres. Uh, but of course, there are some. But then sometimes a series or a book is translated, and then it doesn't really get all the marketing that it should get. So the first or second book in a series gets translated and then it stops. So it's like if you want to finish the series, you kind of have to read in English. So it's kind of like after a while, you kind of just start reading it in English because you don't really want to start the series and then not knowing how it ends. And also, thirdly, a lot of times in Norway, when books come out in English or English in Norwegian, like a book might come out in 2020 in English, and then it comes out 2023 in Norwegian. So like if you like part of the book world, like even if you make your own booktube videos or booktalk videos, like you would still probably often watch them, and then you want to be kind of part of the conversation, and then you having to not being able to read a book because it's not out in Norwegian because it's just not prioritized by the publishers, and then it comes out years later when the hype has died down. That's kind of no fun. So yeah, there was people were agreeing with these kinds of ideas and stuff, and that's people said like they felt like you couldn't write science fiction or fantasy in Norwegian because it felt wrong with writing those kinds of books in Norwegian. And I'm like, well, I mean, you have Norwegian crime books, you have lots of Norwegian authors. So like saying that Norwegian is a good language for crime but not for science fiction, I feel like it's kind of weird because I mean it's a language that we do have, and we do have some science fiction in Norwegian. So I feel like it's a bit like feels a bit like an excuse. To me, it feels like a bit like some people say like, "Oh, I can't do this or this because no one I knows or no one like me has done this and this," or like talk about how role models is good. And yeah, I suppose role models is good because you can see people doing stuff that you want, like you can get inspired with them. But I also feel like if I want to do something, I'll do it. I'll not wait until someone like me does it. I suppose maybe in a way I suppose I kind of get the idea. Like sometimes if you're part of minority, if you're gay, if you're Asian, if you're African American, you might feel like because a lot of times those minorities have like long time been discriminated against. You might not feel safe to do something unless you have people who other people are doing it. But also I'm like, yes, but also like someone has to be the first person. Like if no one's gonna do something because no one else has done it, if you're always waiting for someone else to do it, it's like, well, that things will never happen. But yeah, yes. So that was a good talk, I would say as well. And then after that, there was a talk about monsters. So here I got this book signed. So this is a Norwegian author that kind of I would say most famous Norwegian author who's there. They have this book and then a second book coming out in the fall, the sequel in the fall. This is going to be a quartet. Right now, it's just out in Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, and well, Estonian, maybe Finnish. I'm not quite sure. But it's not out in like all the languages yet. Oh yeah, it's also out in German. So if you speak German, you can read this book. But yeah, so far not out in English. Sorry, guys. But it's a very cool idea for this book. It's all about animals who turn into humans instead of the other way around. And yeah, it's a middle grade series and full twists and turns, and I love it. But yeah, so this in this panel where Håkon Marcus talked, he it was him and two people who talked about monsters and how do you define a monster and what is a monster, and I suppose they kind of dip into shapeshifters and also like the monsters, but also like animals who are kind of monster-like and things like that. And it was a nice, good talk. I liked it very much. And then what happened after that? Because yeah, it was a lot of talk for most of the day. Yeah, then I went and got a book signed by T. Kingfisher. they had like times where they were sitting in a chair doing signings. So that was very fun. Um, and yeah, then like time. Then I went to this talk about. There was this guy who talked about his favorite books, which I like the concept. I suppose very low key concept of like uh the talk, but it was like he was just kind of talking about books they loved. So it wasn't like any debate or something like that. He was just kind of showing pictures and then talking about those and those books. And as I said, I liked the idea, but also it kind of felt a bit like if you're gonna talking about books you love, why are you sitting here? I'm just saying. And then this book was like this and this. It's cool and nice, but if you talk about books you love, what? This book was amazing. I love it so much. Like, show it that you love the book, not just sit and just stare into the universe and being monotone voice and yeah. Yeah. I did get some book tips from that talk, but I would say, in my opinion, it's one of the lesser talks. Really, it was. And then after that, there was a talk with two people talking about the Hugo Awards. Well, they talked about different um, science fiction and fantasy awards. So they talked about Hugo, they talked about the Nebula, they talked about two more ones. Yeah, and then they talked about the different books that were nominated and if you should read them and like what they thought about them and whatnot. So that was a nice, interesting little talk. And then at the very end of the day, we there was a talk at like 8 o'clock in the evening. So yeah, it went from 12 to 8 o'clock in the evening, so it was the whole day. And yeah, the last talk was about tea in literature. So yeah, me loving tea was just like have to go there. uh, Digression. I did meet some friends during the day, and they were going to dinner, but I was like, no, no, I'm gonna see the tea talk. I need to see the tea talk. So yeah, I did that. Oh yeah. Well, I suppose I'm going to finish talking about that first. So yeah, the tea talk was very cool. They talked about how tea, like they talk about tea in books, but also like how tea is a ritual, how it's like cultural importance, how tea is a cool thing in UK, but it's also a thing in China and Asia. Like most of the world has some sort of tea, and also we talk a bit about like difference between coffee and tea, and yeah, and I loved it. It's a very cool way to end the day. Though honestly, the tea that we because in that talk also we got some free tea, so that was nice. But the tea we got was not that tasty, so yeah, that's not fun. But anywho, but also I almost forgot to say there was also a talk slash interview with Emma Newman. So on Friday was an interview with T Kingfisher, Örstavaren, and that because there was like uh two guest of honors, Emma Newman and Örstavaren, and then it was one interview on Friday and the interview with Emma Newman on Saturday. And I loved just hearing her talking about her writing journey and whatnot. And yeah, I loved it. I also got books. Translated book. Um, a book signed by her, which was quite fun. So I bought this book in the con, and I bought this book earlier that I got used. So also here, just love that. So yeah, that's kind of what happened. Well, like with the talks and whatnot. And yeah, I went to one talk on Friday all about podcasts and writing. It's like podcast and writing because I didn't know that, but I feel like a lot of people do podcasts like they do like fictional podcasts when like they do like kind of like audiobooks, but like more in podcast form. Like, oh, that's a thing. But yeah, so they talked about this difference between that and that, and yeah, that was interesting. So yeah, and then like the both Friday and Saturday they had like this big table of of used books that they were selling. So I was like, oh, used books, yes, yes, so fun. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, Renee, why are you buying more books? Do you need more books? No, but it's used, so it doesn't count. But also, it was like used and so cheap. There was like 2 cents, well, 2 American cents. I would say like probably €2 for like each book. So, of course, I had to buy some books. So I'm going to show you them now. Moment. So we have Fantasy Gone Wrong by lots of authors, which is novellas where things go not the way it shouldn't go. And one of the writers in this um, anthology is Jim C. Hines. Love that author, so of course I had to get this book. But also just Fantasy Gone Wrong, just great title, isn't it? Then we have Shooting Sean by Colin Bateman. This isn't a fantasy book. You didn't really have to have fantasy books in the used table, even though, of course, you might think that would be logical, but there were other books as well. This is like comic book about a guy who wants to make it in Hollywood, I believe, but he also travels around. I'm not quite sure what it's about, but it seems to be like a kind of rompy thing. So yeah, I got it. And then we have So You Want to Be a Wizard by Diane Duane. I've heard about this book. I think have I had it in my TBR for a long time? Have I started this book before? I'm not quite sure, but I remember I've heard about this book. It just sounds so cool. Like it's about a girl who finds this how to be a wizard guide in a used bookstore. So like a table where like there's a book that says how to be a plumber, how to be a seller, and then how to be a wizard. So yeah, of course gonna have to get that book. And then we have a Mercedes Lackey book, Exile's Valor. So I read some Mercedes Lackey books, but I haven't read her um Voldemort series. Valdemar, yeah, Voldemort series. With an A, not an O. And yeah, I want to check them out. So got one of those. And yeah, that's was is the books I got there. Sorry. And then of course, on Friday before the con started, this it's con started at 5 o'clock in the evening. So before that, I went a bit here and there. I went to this cool English bookstore in Oslo where they sell only English books. I had ordered a book, so I fetched that book. It is Alone, A Different Way of Living by Daniel Schreiber. So this is by a German journalist, I believe he is. He was on We Can Be Weirdos some months ago. He has the same name as Dan Schreiber, but different name, different people. And yeah, this like book all about being alone and how it is like. I suppose it's kind of like an introvert book, but also how the advantages on being on your own and whatnot. So yeah, I thought sound interesting. I went by a free library, gave away one book, and found this book, Queenie Malone's Paradise Hotel, which is cozy crime, I believe. I'm not quite sure, but like it says it says laugh out loud funny, so yeah, had to get it. And then I also went to not the only, what? Actually, there's like one store in Norway that has still sells CDs and DVDs and whatnot. Yes, something became very light. Anyway, and yeah, I'm analog. I still like to have a CD sometimes to put on CD. I still like DVDs and Blu-rays. So I got Monty Python's Flying Circus, the whole collection in one disc, in one binder. And then we have Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Love it as well. And then we have Queen, greatest hits. I actually had used to have a greatest hits Queen song, Queen CD years ago. I don't for life of me know where it went away because I believe I haven't found it lately. I feel like it's kind of been lost to time or whatever. So yeah, now I have it again. So yeah, that is kind of my uh my thoughts and my experiences over the weekend. It was yeah, a very nice weekend. I loved it. Definitely gonna go back for norcon next year. It was yeah, a great experience. I laughed a lot, smiled a lot, had found some new books to put in my TBR, and yeah, had a great time. Uh, that's that really. I'll see you later this week. Also, so not important, but I'm just gonna say it. So I'm still gonna do sprinting because I like to sprint, but I decided to move over from StreamYard to going back to YouTube because you can also do YouTube sprinting. Because honestly, StreamYard is expensive. Well, it's not expensive, but it's not like I'm not made of money, so I said I'm gonna cut back on that because YouTube doesn't pay you. It's just kind of well, YouTube doesn't. You don't have to pay YouTube for that. It's still it's free on YouTube. So yeah, just so you know that. But it's still going to be the same time whenever, but it's just going to be slightly different because it's not going to be on StreamYard. So yeah, I hope you guys had a nice weekend. And if you read any of these books, please tell me. And I'll see you soon. Bye.